I didn't notice how my daughter-in-law was substituting the medicine when she picked it up from the pharmacy. The pharmacist winked, and I saw her nigh take this instead. When she realized what had happened, her face turned pale with fear, and her eyes filled with horror. She'll finally get what she deserves. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The fever hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I gripped the door frame, my knuckles white against the wood, watching Paul and Nellie sprawled across my leather couch like they owned the place. The TV's blue glow painted their faces as they watched some medieval drama, completely absorbed in fictional bloodshed, while I stood there burning up from the inside. "Paul, I need to get to the pharmacy." My voice came out rougher than I intended, scratched raw from the cough that had been tearing at my throat all day. "My temperature is nearly 104. He didn't even turn his head, just shifted his weight, adjusting the throw pillow behind his back. My throw pillow on my couch in my living room. "Not now, Dad. We're watching the season finale." The casual dismissal hit harder than any physical blow. I pressed my palm against the wall, feeling the house I'd worked 40 years to pay for, feeling the sweat soaking through my pajamas. My breathing came in short gasps, each one sending fire through my chest. The TV volumes seemed to mock me. Some queen on screen talking about power and betrayal, while my own son couldn't spare 5 minutes to help his dying father. "Please," I tried again, my voice barely above a whisper. "The pharmacy closes in 30 minutes. Nellie finally looked up, her eyes reflecting the screen's light like a cat's. She rolled them with theatrical exaggeration before turning back to the show. "It's not like you're actually dying, Ray. Take some aspirin." The words hung in the air like poison. Here I was shaking with fever, probably looking like death warmed over, and my daughter-in-law, the woman I'd welcomed into my home, the woman I'd helped support for 3 years. Couldn't be bothered to show an ounce of concern. Paul just nodded along, his attention already back on the screen where dragons soared over burning cities. I thought about all those nights I'd worked double shifts at Morrison's auto shop, coming home with oil under my fingernails and aches in every joint, just to make sure Paul had everything he needed. The college fund I'd built penny by penny, the wedding I'd helped pay for when Paul lost his job the first time, the house I'd opened to them when they couldn't make rent on their apartment. "You've been living in my house rent-free for 3 years. The words erupted from somewhere deep in my chest, hot and bitter. Paul's head snapped toward me then, his face twisting with irritation. Here we go again with the guilt trips. Guilt trips. I stepped into the room, my legs unsteady, but my anger giving me strength. "You haven't paid a dime toward utilities, groceries, or mortgage. You haven't even looked for a job in 6 months. The job market is tough, Dad. You wouldn't understand, wouldn't understand, wouldn't understand. 40 years of waking up at 5 in the morning, of burning my hands on hot engines, of crawling under cars in the middle of winter, and I wouldn't understand hard work." I stared at my son, this man I'd raised, this stranger who'd taken my generosity and turned it into entitlement. The fever made everything feel surreal, like I was watching this scene from outside my body. The comfortable living room I'd furnished piece by piece over the decades suddenly felt foreign. The family photos on the mantelpiece, Paul's graduation, his wedding day, Christmas mornings when he was small, and still looked at me like I hung the moon. All seemed to belong to someone else's life. Nellie made a show of pausing the TV, sighing heavily as if we were interrupting something vital to national security. "Can we please finish this discussion after the episode? We've been waiting all week to see how it ends." All week they'd been planning this evening of entertainment, while I'd been fighting this fever, trying to take care of myself, because clearly no one else would. The medicine cabinet upstairs was empty. I'd used the last of the cold medicine 2 days ago. The pharmacy would close soon, and then I'd be stuck suffering through the night with nothing but aspirin and their complete indifference. "Why should you rush anyway?" I heard myself saying, the words spilling out before I could stop them. The fever was making me reckless, stripping away the careful politeness I usually maintained with them. "You'll inherit this house eventually." That got their attention. Paul's eyebrows shot up, and even Nellie leaned forward slightly, but I was just getting started. The dam had burst, and 40 years of careful saving, of sacrifice, of building something to leave behind came pouring out, plus the 200,000 in savings. The silence that followed was different from before. The TV continued its soundtrack of clashing swords and dramatic music, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. I could see Nellie's mind working, calculating, her eyes suddenly sharp and focused in a way they'd never been when I was just the old man providing free housing. Paul opened his mouth to speak, but I was already turning away, my energy spent, my revelation hanging in the air like smoke from a battlefield. My legs felt like water, and I knew I needed to get upstairs before I collapsed right there on the hardwood floor I'd refinished with my own hands 10 years ago. The stairs loomed ahead of me like a mountain to climb, and behind me I could hear the whispered conversation beginning, urgent and calculating, as the true weight of what I'd just revealed began to sink into their greedy minds. The whispered conversation stopped the moment my foot hit the first step. I gripped the banister, my knuckles aching from the pressure, and turned back to look at them. They were sitting up straighter now, no longer the lazy sprawl of moments before. The medieval drama played unforgotten, while a different kind of calculation took place in my living room. "Dad, wait." Paul's voice had changed, taken on that careful tone he used when he wanted something. "Maybe we were a bit hasty. If you're really feeling that bad, too little, too late." The concern in his voice was as transparent as glass and just as fragile. I could see right through it to the dollar signs dancing in his head. $650,000. That's what I just handed them. The knowledge of exactly what they'd inherit when I was gone. Nellie had muted the television now, her full attention focused on me for the first time in months. She tucked her legs under herself, leaning forward with sudden interest. "Ray, you know we care about you. We're just stressed about money lately." Stressed about money. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't burning up with fever. They lived rent-free in a house worth $450,000, 8 groceries I paid for, used utilities I covered, and they were stressed about money. Meanwhile, I'd worked until my hands were permanently stained with motor oil, and my back was curved from decades of bending over engines. "How much exactly did you say was in savings?" Nellie's question came out too casual, too practiced. She was trying to sound concerned rather than calculating, but I'd been around long enough to recognize greed when I heard it. The fever made everything crystal clear, like looking through water that had suddenly settled. I could see the shift in their body language, the way they were both oriented toward me now instead of the screen, the way Paul was running his tongue over his lower lip, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood when he was plotting something, the way Nellie's eyes had sharpened, losing that glass look of boredom they'd held all evening. 200,000, I repeated, my voice but steady. 40 years of saving, working overtime when other men were home with their families, missing Paul's Little League games to fix Mrs. Henderson's transmission for the 3rd time, because she couldn't afford to take it to the dealership. Paul had the grace to look uncomfortable at that last part. He remembered those games, remembered scanning the bleachers for me and finding empty space, but discomfort wasn't the same as shame, and it certainly wasn't the same as gratitude. "And the house is worth what now?" Nellie pressed, no longer bothering to hide her interest behind fake concern. "Assessed at 450 last year." The numbers felt heavy in my mouth, numbers that represented decades of mortgage payments, of choosing the house payment over a new car, of eating hamburger instead of steak, so I could build something lasting. Something to leave behind for the son who couldn't be bothered to drive me to the pharmacy when I was sick. The silence stretched between us, filled with the sounds of battle from the forgotten television show, but the real battle was happening right here in my living room, and I was finally starting to understand the stakes. This wasn't about cold medicine or television shows. This was about respect, about what I'd become in their eyes. Not a father or a provider, but an obstacle standing between them and their inheritance. Paul cleared his throat. "Maybe we could discuss this more when you're feeling better. You know, make some plans for the future." Plans for the future. My future, which in their minds was apparently very short. I watched Nellie nod enthusiastically, her eyes bright with something that definitely wasn't concern for my health. They were already spending my money, already dividing up my life's work between them. The fever spiked again, sending chills down my spine despite the heat radiating from my skin. I needed to get upstairs, needed to lie down before I collapsed. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I just witnessed. The transformation of my son and daughter-in-law from lazy freeloaders into eager vultures, circling around what they saw as their rightful inheritance. "Get your rest, Ray," Nellie said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We'll talk about everything tomorrow when you're feeling stronger." Tomorrow, when I'd be one day closer to the grave. They were obviously eager for me to occupy. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady, and began the long climb upstairs. Each step felt like lifting weights, my legs trembling with the effort. Behind me, I heard the television being turned off completely. The first time in months they'd chosen a family discussion over entertainment. The irony wasn't lost on me that it took revealing my death benefits to get their attention. 40 years of love, sacrifice, and support couldn't compete with two numbers, 450,000 and 200,000. That was my worth to them. Now, not as a father, not as the man who'd worked himself nearly to death. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed, 8 km in angry red numbers. 45 minutes since this nightmare began downstairs. 45 minutes since I'd learned exactly what I meant to my own family. The fever had climbed high. I could feel it in the way my thoughts jumped around like grasshoppers, in the way the room seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. I pulled the comforter up to my chin, but it did nothing to stop the chills that racked my body. The sheets beneath me were already damp with sweat, and I knew this was going to be a long, brutal night if I survived it at all. At my age, with my heart condition, pneumonia could finish what 40 years of hard labor had started. The thought brought no self-pity, only a strange clarity. I'd always known I wouldn't live forever. 68 years was more than some got, and I'd packed plenty of living into those decades. But lying there burning up with fever, while the people I loved most in the world calculated my net worth downstairs, I realized I'd been a fool. Memories crashed over me in waves, each one sharp as broken glass. Paul at 18, accepting the keys to the used Honda I'd bought him for graduation. Not a thank you, just a complaint that it wasn't the Mustang his friend Tommy got. That should have been my first clue, but I'd made excuses. He's young. I told myself he'll appreciate it when he's older. The college bills came next.